I arrived at the airport for my son's wedding and saw my tickets had been canceled. The words on the computer screen blurred together as I read them again. Booking canceled by passenger request. But I hadn't requested anything. "Ma'am, is there a problem?" The airline employee, a young woman with kind eyes, looked at me with concern.
Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching.
I must have been staring at the screen for too long. "There's been a mistake," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "These are my tickets to San Francisco. My son's wedding is today." She clicked through several screens, her brow furrowing. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Hartwell, but these were canceled yesterday afternoon at 2:47 p.m. The cancellation came through our customer service line, and our records show it was requested by a family member." Family member. The words hit me like ice water. I clutched my purse tighter, feeling the weight of the carefully wrapped wedding gift inside. I had spent 3 weeks choosing the perfect silver picture frame, the kind Michael and Jennifer would display on their mantle, the kind that said this moment mattered to me. "Can you tell me who called?" I asked. The employee shook her head sympathetically. "I'm sorry. Privacy regulations prevent me from sharing that information. But I can try to get you on another flight. Let me see what's available." I stood there in my best navy dress, the one I'd bought specifically for this occasion, watching her fingers dance across the keyboard. Around me, travelers rushed past with rolling suitcases and purpose. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they belonged. Everyone except me. "Mrs. Hartwell," a familiar voice made me turn. Jennifer stood a few feet away, looking effortlessly elegant in cream-colored slacks and a silk blouse. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled despite the early morning hour, and she carried a small Louis Vuitton bag that cost more than my monthly Social Security check. "Jennifer, thank goodness you're here." Relief flooded through me. "There's been some confusion with my tickets. They say they were canceled, but—" "Oh," Jennifer's expression shifted, a micro-expression I almost missed. Not surprise, not confusion. Something closer to annoyance. "Yes, about that. There was a small issue with the guest list." "Guest list?" I felt stupid repeating her words, but nothing was making sense. The venue had capacity restrictions we weren't aware of initially. Jennifer's voice was smooth, practiced. Michael felt terrible about it, but we had to make some difficult choices about who could attend. The airline employee looked between us uncomfortably. "I'll give you two some privacy," she murmured, moving to help another customer. I stared at Jennifer, trying to process what she was telling me. "But Michael called me himself 3 weeks ago. He said he was excited for me to be there. He said—" I stopped, remembering his exact words. He'd said it wouldn't be the same without me. "I know this is disappointing," Jennifer continued, her tone taking on the patient quality people use with confused elderly relatives. "But honestly, Linda, you'd probably be more comfortable at home anyway. These destination weddings can be so exhausting. And with your age." "My age?" The words came out sharper than I intended. Several people nearby glanced our way. "I'm 65, Jennifer, not 90. She laughed, a sound like wind chimes that somehow felt cold. "Of course you're right. I just meant that traveling can be stressful, and we want you to take care of yourself. Michael would never forgive himself if something happened to you because of the wedding." I opened my mouth to argue, to point out that I'd been taking care of myself just fine since Robert died 2 years ago, when I noticed something that made my breath catch. On Jennifer's left hand, gleaming in the airport's fluorescent light, was a ring I recognized. An emerald surrounded by small diamonds in an intricate gold setting. It had belonged to Robert's mother. I'd given it to Michael 6 months ago, telling him it should stay in the family for when he was ready to propose. But Jennifer was already married to Michael, had been for 2 years. This was their second wedding, a do-over, as Jennifer called it, since their first had been a small courthouse ceremony. "That's beautiful," I said, nodding toward the ring. Jennifer glanced down and smiled, twisting the ring on her finger. "Oh, this old thing? I found it in a little antique shop in town. The owner said it was probably from the 1940s, cost a fortune, but Michael insisted." My chest tightened. She was lying, standing in an airport, looking me in the eye, and lying about wearing my dead mother-in-law's ring. "Well," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady, "I should probably head home then. Long drive back." "That's probably for the best," Jennifer agreed quickly, too quickly. "I'll tell Michael you send your love. Maybe we can all have dinner when we get back from the honeymoon. Somewhere quiet, you know. Somewhere more suitable." Suitable. The word hung between us like a slap. I watched Jennifer walk away, her heels clicking confidently on the polished airport floor. She didn't look back, not once. I stood there for a long moment, surrounded by the noise and chaos of departing travelers, feeling more alone than I had since the day Robert died. The young airline employee returned to her station and caught my eye. "Mrs. Hartwell, were you able to work things out?" "Yes," I lied. "Everything's been resolved." I picked up my purse and the wrapped wedding gift and began the long walk back to the parking garage. With each step, questions multiplied in my mind. When had Michael decided I wasn't important enough to include? How long had Jennifer been making decisions about my place in their lives? And why was she wearing Robert's mother's ring while telling me she'd bought it in an antique shop? By the time I reached my car, one thought had crystallized with painful clarity. This wasn't about venue capacity or travel concerns. This was about Jennifer deciding that I simply didn't matter enough to be there for my own son's wedding. When I asked my daughter-in-law, she sneered, "We only invited who matters. You're almost dead anyway." The words echoed in my mind as I drove home through empty morning streets, past houses where other families were probably getting ready for their own celebrations. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, wondering when exactly I had become someone who didn't matter. The house felt different when I walked through the front door. Emptier somehow, though nothing had visibly changed. I set the wrapped wedding gift on the kitchen counter and stared at it for a long moment. 3 weeks of careful consideration, 2 hours in the department store, and $47 I couldn't really afford, all for a gift that would never be opened. I made myself a cup of coffee with hands that still trembled slightly and sat at the kitchen table where Robert and I had shared breakfast for 28 years. The silence pressed against me like a weight. I should have been in San Francisco right now, watching my son marry the woman he loved. Instead, I was sitting alone in an empty house, trying to understand how I'd become so expendable. My phone buzzed. A text from my neighbor Carol Peterson. "Saw Jennifer leaving your driveway about an hour ago. Everything okay?" I stared at the message. Jennifer had been here? When? I'd left for the airport at 6:30 this morning, and Jennifer claimed to be at the airport herself around 8. The timeline didn't make sense. I walked to the front window and looked across the street. Carol was in her garden, deadheading roses despite the early hour. At 71, she kept the same schedule she'd maintained as a high school principal for 40 years. Up at 5, garden work before the heat, breakfast at 7:30 sharp. I stepped outside and crossed the street. "Carol, you said you saw Jennifer?" "About 7:15, Carol said, straightening up and brushing soil from her gloves. She had that big designer bag of hers and seemed to be in a hurry. I waved, but she didn't see me. Carol paused, studying my face. "Linda, you look upset. Shouldn't you be at the wedding?" The question broke something loose in my chest. There was no wedding. Not for me, anyway. Carol set down her pruning shears. "Come sit down. Tell me what happened." I found myself pouring out the whole story, the canceled tickets, Jennifer's explanation about capacity restrictions, the lie about the ring. Carol listened without interruption, her expression growing more troubled with each detail. "Linda," she said finally, "I need to tell you something. I've seen Jennifer at your house several times over the past few months when you weren't there. I always assumed she had a key, that maybe she was helping you with something." "What times?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. "Thursday afternoons, usually, sometimes Saturday mornings. She always had bags with her, shopping bags, but also..." Carol hesitated. This might sound strange, but it looked like she was taking things out to her car. A cold dread settled in my stomach. "What kind of things?" I couldn't tell from this distance, but Linda, she was there for hours sometimes. I figured maybe she was helping you organize or donate items. After Robert died, a lot of people downsize. I hadn't donated anything, hadn't organized anything beyond what was necessary to keep the house running. Most of Robert's things were exactly where he'd left them. Back in my house, I began walking through rooms with new eyes. Everything looked normal at first glance, but as I paid closer attention, small discrepancies emerged. The crystal vase that usually sat on the mantel was gone. I'd attributed its absence to my own poor memory. Maybe I'd moved it and forgotten. The silver letter opener from Robert's desk set was missing too, and the small Waterford clock that had been his retirement gift. In the bedroom, I opened my jewelry box. The pearl earrings Robert had given me for our 15th anniversary weren't there. Neither was the gold bracelet I'd inherited from my mother. I stood there staring at the empty spaces where they should have been, feeling sick. My phone rang. Michael's name on the display made my heart race. "Mom?" His voice sounded strained. "I just got off the plane. Jennifer said there was some confusion about your tickets." Confusion. I repeated the word carefully. "Is that what she called it?" "She said the venue had capacity issues and you decided it would be better to stay home. She said you were feeling overwhelmed by the travel." I closed my eyes. Even now, Jennifer was controlling the narrative. "Michael, I never decided to stay home. I was at the airport this morning, ready to fly to your wedding. My tickets had been canceled." Silence on the other end. Then, "That doesn't make sense. Jennifer handled all the travel arrangements. She would have told me if there was a problem. Would she?" "Mom, what are you implying?" The edge in his voice made me pause. This was my son, the little boy I'd raised alone after his father left when he was 8. The teenager who'd called me every day his first year of college because he missed our evening talks. The young man who'd held my hand at Robert's funeral and promised we'd take care of each other. But it was also the man who had apparently gotten married without noticing his mother wasn't there. "I'm not implying anything," I said. "I'm telling you what happened. I was excluded from your wedding and I don't understand why. Look, Mom, I'm exhausted. It's been a long day, and I just want to enjoy my honeymoon. Can we talk about this when I get back?" "Of course," I said, though the dismissal stung. "Enjoy your honeymoon." After he hung up, I sat in Robert's old recliner and tried to make sense of everything. The canceled tickets, Jennifer's presence at my house when I wasn't there, the missing jewelry, and now this phone call where Michael seemed more concerned with avoiding conflict than understanding what had happened. I got up and walked to Robert's old desk in the corner of the living room. He'd used it for paying bills and managing our finances. I rarely sat there now. It felt too much like invading his space, but tonight, I needed to think clearly, and somehow being at his desk made me feel less alone. I pulled out a notebook and started writing down everything I could remember. Dates, times, missing items, conversations. The pattern that emerged made my hands shake. Over the past 6 months, Jennifer had been systematically removing valuable items from my house. Small things, items I wouldn't immediately miss. She'd been coming here regularly, helping herself to pieces of my life while I was at the grocery store, at my book club, at my volunteer shift at the hospital. And today, she'd excluded me from my own son's wedding with a lie so smooth that even Michael believed it. I was still sitting at Robert's desk when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. In the back corner, wedged behind his old electric pencil sharpener, was a folded piece of paper. I pulled it out with trembling fingers. It was a handwritten list in Jennifer's distinctive looping cursive. At the top, she'd written, "Estate Assessment, LH." Below that, a detailed inventory of items in my house with estimated values written beside each one. Crystal vase, $150. Pearl earrings, $300. Gold bracelet, $250. Silver letter opener, $75. At the bottom of the list, in different ink, she'd added a note. "Discuss with M after honeymoon. Timeline for transition. Timeline for transition." I stared at those words until they burned themselves into my mind. I stared at Jennifer's handwritten list until the words began to blur. Estate Assessment, LH, my initials, Linda Hartwell. But it wasn't my assessment. It was Jennifer's evaluation of everything I owned, written in the calculating tone of someone appraising merchandise. The list was thorough, disturbingly thorough. Items I hadn't even noticed were missing. Mother's china serving bowl, $125. Robert's coin collection, $400. Antique lamp from living room, $275. She'd been cataloging my possessions like a vulture circling overhead, waiting for the right moment to swoop down. I turned the paper over and found more notes, these in a different pen, suggesting they'd been added later. Ars Tools, garage sale value approx $300. Below that, check attic storage, vintage items, and at the very bottom, underlined twice, insurance papers, location. My hand shook as I folded the paper and slipped it into the pocket of my dress. Jennifer wasn't just stealing random items. She was conducting a systematic inventory of everything Robert and I had accumulated over 40 years of marriage. She was planning something bigger than petty theft. The phone rang again, making me jump. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Hartwell? This is Jessica from Coastal Appraisals. I had an appointment scheduled for next Thursday to evaluate some items at your residence. I'm sorry, I said, confused. I didn't make any appointment. Oh, a pause. Let me check my notes. Yes, I have here that a Jennifer Hartwell called to schedule an evaluation of antiques and collectibles. She said she was handling the arrangements for you. Jennifer Hartwell. She was using Michael's last name, presenting herself as family with authority to make decisions about my property. I'm going to need to cancel that appointment, I said. Of course. Should I reschedule for a different time? No, there won't be any appraisal. After I hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my living room, pieces of a terrible puzzle falling into place. Jennifer hadn't just been stealing items, she'd been having them professionally appraised. The estate assessment list wasn't for her personal knowledge. It was preparation for something much more comprehensive. I thought about her comment at the airport. You're almost dead anyway. Not a cruel throwaway line, but a business calculation. In Jennifer's mind, I was a temporary obstacle standing between her and everything Robert had worked his entire life to provide for me. The next morning, I called my insurance company and asked them to send me copies of all recent inquiries about my policy. The representative seemed confused by the request. Mrs. Hartwell, are you sure you want us to send this information? Your daughter-in-law called just last month asking about the same documents. My daughter-in-law called you? Yes, Jennifer Hartwell. She said she was helping you organize your papers and needed copies of your homeowner's policy and life insurance documents. We mailed them to your address about 3 weeks ago. I never received those documents, which meant Jennifer had intercepted them, just like she'd intercepted who knows how many other pieces of mail over the past months. I'd like you to send them again, I said, and I want to add a note to my file that only I am authorized to request information about my policies. Of course, Mrs. Hartwell. Is there a security concern we should be aware of? I almost laughed. A security concern. That was one way to describe having your daughter-in-law systematically catalog your possessions while planning your financial future without your knowledge. Just a precaution, I said. That afternoon, I drove to Michael's neighborhood and parked across the street from his house. I felt slightly ridiculous, like a spy in a bad movie, but I needed to understand how deep this went. If Jennifer had been taking things from my house, where was she putting them? The house Michael shared with Jennifer was a modest 2-bedroom ranch, similar to dozens of others in their subdivision. Michael's salary as a sales manager was decent but not extravagant. Jennifer worked part-time as a personal trainer, teaching fitness classes at a local gym. Together, they lived comfortably, but not luxuriously, or so I'd thought. As I watched, a delivery truck pulled into their driveway. 2 men unloaded a large flat-screen television still in its box, premium brand, the kind that cost several $1,000s. 20 minutes later, another truck arrived with what looked like furniture, a leather sofa set that the delivery men handled with obvious care. I knew Michael and Jennifer weren't wealthy. Michael had borrowed money from me just 6 months ago to cover unexpected car repairs. $500 he'd promised to pay back, but never had. So where was the money for expensive electronics and furniture coming from? My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Just wanted to let you know we're extending our honeymoon by a few days. Jennifer found an amazing spa package. We'll call when we get back. Extended honeymoon, spa packages, new furniture and electronics, all while Michael supposedly struggled with basic car repairs. I drove home with a growing certainty that Jennifer's estate assessment was funding more than just her own shopping habits. She was using my stolen possessions to bankroll an entire lifestyle upgrade, selling my mother's jewelry and Robert's collectibles to pay for luxuries she couldn't otherwise afford. Back home, I conducted my own inventory, walking through each room with a notebook and cataloging everything I could remember that was missing. The list grew longer than I'd expected. Not just the obviously valuable items, but smaller things too. A silver picture frame, a hand-painted vase, even some of Robert's books, first editions he'd collected over the years. In the garage, I found more evidence. Robert's tool collection, which he'd spent decades assembling, was significantly diminished. His prized electric drill, the one he'd saved up to buy for his workshop, was gone. So was the antique hand plane his father had given him, and the complete set of socket wrenches he'd organized so meticulously on his pegboard. I thought about all the times Jennifer had volunteered to help me with household tasks, offering to pick up groceries while I was at book club, suggesting she could organize the garage while I visited Carol. Always helpful, always considerate, always looking for opportunities to be alone in my house. The worst part wasn't the theft itself, though that was devastating enough. It was the calculated nature of it. Jennifer had been studying me, learning my routines, identifying when I'd be away from home. She'd been patient, taking only a few items at a time so I wouldn't notice the pattern. And she'd been smart, starting with things I rarely used or might assume I'd misplaced. But she'd made one mistake. She'd kept that list. I pulled Jennifer's inventory from my pocket and read it again, this time paying attention to details I'd missed before. Some items were marked with a small star. Others had question marks. A few were circled in red ink. The starred items, pearl earrings, crystal vase, silver letter opener, were already gone. The items with question marks were still in my house, but now I understood they were on Jennifer's target list. And the items circled in red? Those were the most valuable pieces I owned. Robert's vintage watch, my grandmother's wedding ring, the small painting Robert had inherited from his aunt. Not worth a fortune, but valuable enough to catch an appraiser's attention. Jennifer hadn't taken those yet because they were items I'd definitely notice if they disappeared. She was waiting for something. The right moment, the right opportunity, the right excuse. Or maybe she was waiting for me to die so she could claim them legally. I thought about her words at the airport again. You're almost dead anyway. Not a cruel insult, but a timeline. In Jennifer's mind, she was simply accelerating an inevitable process, taking what would eventually be hers anyway through Michael. Except Michael didn't know about any of this. My son, for all his recent distance and seeming indifference, wasn't a thief. He was being manipulated just as thoroughly as I was, just in a different way. The question was, what was I going to do about it? 3 days passed before Michael called again. 3 days of me sitting with Jennifer's inventory list, memorizing every item, every notation, every casual cruelty reduced to dollar signs and question marks. When his name finally appeared on my phone, I felt both relief and dread. "Mom, how are you doing?" His voice carried that careful tone people use when they're not sure what emotional landmine they might step on. "I'm fine, Michael. How was the extended honeymoon?" "It was great. Really great. The spa Jennifer found was incredible. She has such a good eye for these things." He paused. "Listen, Mom, I wanted to talk to you about the wedding situation. I feel like there might have been some miscommunication. Miscommunication. Such a clean, neutral word for what had happened. "I'm listening," I said. Jennifer explained everything to me. "She said you've been feeling overwhelmed lately, and when she offered to help with the travel arrangements, you mentioned that maybe it would be better if you stayed home. She thought she was doing what you wanted." I closed my eyes. Of course that was the story Jennifer had told him. It was brilliant in its simplicity. It made me the one who had chosen to be excluded while casting Jennifer as the thoughtful daughter-in-law trying to honor my wishes. "Michael, I never said anything like that to Jennifer." "Are you sure? Sometimes when we're stressed, we might say things and not remember them clearly." The patronizing tone in his voice, gentle, concerned, but unmistakably condescending, made my chest tighten. This was how Jennifer had been positioning me, as a confused older woman whose memory couldn't be trusted. "I'm very sure," I said firmly. "I was excited about your wedding. I had bought a new dress, wrapped your gift, and was at the airport ready to board my flight when I discovered my tickets had been canceled. Jennifer said she tried to call you several times about the venue restrictions, but you didn't answer." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my recent calls. No missed calls from Jennifer. No voicemails. Nothing. There are no missed calls from Jennifer on my phone, Michael. Maybe there was a technical problem. You know how unreliable cell service can be sometimes. He was making excuses for her, just like she'd probably coached him to do. Every contradiction, every inconsistency in her story would be explained away as my confusion, my forgetfulness, my unreliable technology. "Michael," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "can you answer one question honestly?" "Of course. At your wedding, did you notice I wasn't there? Did you wonder where I was, even for a moment?" The silence that followed was answer enough. When he finally spoke, his voice was smaller, less certain. "I was. It was a really busy day. There were so many people, so many things happening. Jennifer was handling all the details, and I guess I just trusted that everyone who was supposed to be there was there. Everyone who was supposed to be there." The words hit me like a physical blow. In Michael's mind, I hadn't been supposed to be there. Jennifer had so effectively managed the situation that my own son hadn't even noticed my absence at one of the most important moments of his life. "I see," I said quietly. "Mom, don't be like that. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. It was just a wedding. We can have a family dinner when things calm down, take some pictures. It doesn't have to be this dramatic. Just a wedding. His wedding. The day he promised to love and honor another person for the rest of his life. And he was dismissing my exclusion from it as unimportant drama. "You're right," I said. "It doesn't have to be dramatic." "Good. I'm glad you understand. Jennifer was really worried that you were upset with her. She's been trying so hard to make you feel included in our lives." Included. I thought about Jennifer's secret inventory list, her intercepted mail, her systematic theft of my possessions. That was her version of inclusion. "Michael, I need to ask you about something else. Have you been in my house recently? Have you taken anything from here?" "What? No. Why would you ask that?" "Some things are missing. Jewelry mostly. Small valuable items. Mom, are you sure you're not just misplacing things? After Dad died, you said yourself that you sometimes felt scattered, forgetful." I had said that. In the immediate aftermath of Robert's death, when grief made simple tasks feel impossible, I had mentioned to Michael that I was having trouble keeping track of things. It was a normal part of grieving, something any widow would understand. But now I realized Jennifer had been storing up every admission of vulnerability, every moment of human frailty, to use against me later. "I'm not misplacing them, Michael. They've been stolen." "Stolen? Mom, who would steal from you? And how would they get in? You always keep your doors locked." He was right. I did always keep my doors locked, except when Jennifer visited. Jennifer, who had volunteered to help with so many household tasks. Jennifer, who I'd trusted with my spare key so she could let herself in when I wasn't home. "I think Jennifer has been taking things," I said. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Mom," Michael said finally, his voice tight with controlled anger. "That's a serious accusation. Do you realize what you're saying? I'm saying that valuable items are missing from my house, and Jennifer is the only person besides you who has regular access. Jennifer would never steal from you. She's not even interested in old jewelry or collectibles. She likes modern things, contemporary styles. Besides, we're doing fine financially. We don't need to steal from anyone." I thought about the expensive furniture being delivered to their house, the extended honeymoon, the spa packages. But I couldn't tell Michael what I'd seen without admitting I'd been spying on them. "Michael, please, just consider the possibility that—" "No," his voice was sharp now, all pretense of patience gone. "I won't consider it because it's ridiculous. Jennifer loves you. She's always going out of her way to help you, to include you in our lives. And this is how you repay her kindness? By accusing her of being a thief? She excluded me from your wedding. She was trying to protect you from a stressful situation. She thought you'd be more comfortable at home. She lied about buying your grandmother's ring in an antique shop." Another pause. "What ring?" The emerald ring she was wearing at the airport. The one that belonged to Robert's mother. The one I gave you 6 months ago to give to Jennifer when you were ready. That ring fits perfectly with her vintage style. She must have forgotten where it came from originally." Even now, even confronted with an obvious lie, he was making excuses for her. Jennifer had him so thoroughly convinced of my unreliability that he was willing to explain away her deliberate deception rather than question her honesty. "Michael, I'm your mother. I raised you alone for 10 years after your father left. I worked 2 jobs to pay for your college. I've never lied to you. Why would I start now?" "I don't think you're lying," he said, his voice softer but still strained. "I think you're confused, maybe lonely, maybe still grieving Dad more than you want to admit, but accusing Jennifer of stealing from you. Mom, it's not normal, not normal." There it was. Jennifer's ultimate weapon. She'd positioned me as the unreliable narrator of my own life, the confused widow whose grief had made her paranoid and accusatory. Anything I said that contradicted Jennifer's version of events would be dismissed as evidence of my declining mental state. "I should go," I said. "I can see this conversation isn't going anywhere productive." "Mom, wait. I don't want to fight with you. I love you. We both love you. But you have to understand how this sounds from our perspective. Our perspective. When had Michael started thinking of himself and Jennifer as a unit separate from me? When had I become other in the equation of our family? I understand perfectly, I said. Goodbye, Michael. I hung up and sat in Robert's chair, staring at the phone in my hands. My own son thought I was losing my mind. Jennifer had crafted such a perfect narrative. The confused, grieving widow making wild accusations against her devoted daughter-in-law, that even obvious evidence was being dismissed as the product of my supposedly deteriorating mental state. But I wasn't confused, and I wasn't paranoid. I was just inconvenient. I was the obstacle standing between Jennifer and whatever long-term plan she had for my assets, and she was systematically removing that obstacle, not through violence or direct confrontation, but through something far more insidious, the slow erosion of my credibility and my relationships. The brilliant thing about Jennifer's approach was its subtlety. She wasn't trying to have me declared incompetent or committed to a care facility. She was simply making sure that when I tried to defend myself, no one would believe me. I pulled Jennifer's inventory list from my pocket and read it again. At the bottom, in that different ink, was the note I'd been trying not to think about. Discuss with M after honeymoon. Timeline for transition. Timeline for transition. Now I understood what that meant. Jennifer wasn't just stealing random items to fund her lifestyle upgrades. She was preparing for something bigger. She was getting ready to transition from taking things piecemeal to taking everything at once. And Michael, convinced of his wife's innocence and his mother's confusion, would probably help her do it. A week later, Jennifer called me. I was in the garden, pulling weeds from Robert's rose bed, when my phone rang. The name on the display made my stomach clench, but I answered anyway. Linda? Jennifer's voice was different, higher, breathless, with an edge of desperation I'd never heard before. Thank God you answered. I need to talk to you. I set down my gardening gloves and sat on the back porch steps. What about? Can I come over? Please? I know things have been tense between us, but I really need your help. Something in her tone made me pause. This wasn't the confident, controlled Jennifer I knew. This was someone who sounded genuinely frightened. What kind of help? I can't explain over the phone. Please, Linda. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking you to give me 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes to explain everything. Against my better judgment, I found myself saying, "All right, come over." She arrived 20 minutes later, and I barely recognized her. Gone was the polished appearance I was used to seeing. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, she wore no makeup, and her eyes were red and swollen as if she'd been crying. She looked younger, more vulnerable, and for a moment I felt a flutter of the maternal concern I'd once felt for her. "Thank you for seeing me," she said as I led her into the living room. "I know you probably hate me right now. I don't hate you, Jennifer, but I am very confused by your behavior." She sat on the edge of the sofa, twisting her wedding ring, the one that had belonged to Robert's mother, around her finger. The gesture was so nervous, so unlike her usual composed demeanor, that I found myself leaning forward despite my resolve to keep my distance. "I've made terrible mistakes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Terrible, terrible mistakes. And now everything is falling apart." "What kind of mistakes?" Jennifer looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. "The wedding. Your tickets. I did cancel them." The admission hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd known it was true. Hearing her say it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "Why?" "Because I was jealous." The words came out in a rush. "I was jealous of how much Michael loves you, how much he values your opinion. I wanted our wedding to be about us, just us, without having to worry about whether you approved or whether you thought I was good enough for your son." I stared at her, trying to process this explanation. It was honest, more honest than I'd expected from Jennifer, but it didn't excuse what she'd done. "So you lied to him about venue restrictions?" "Yes." She wiped her nose with a tissue. "And I told him you were feeling overwhelmed and preferred to stay home. I thought it would be a small thing. One day that was just about Michael and me. I was going to make it up to you afterward, plan a nice dinner, include you in everything going forward. But you didn't just exclude me from the wedding, Jennifer. You've been lying about other things too. Her face went pale. What do you mean? I went to Robert's desk and retrieved the inventory list from the drawer where I'd been keeping it. Jennifer's eyes widened as I unfolded it and held it up. You left this behind during one of your visits to my house. One of your visits when I wasn't home. Jennifer stared at the paper as if it were a snake that might strike. Where did you find that? Behind Robert's pencil sharpener. You must have dropped it the last time you were here cataloging my possessions. Linda, I can explain. Can you? Can you explain why you've been systematically stealing from me for months? Can you explain why you had my insurance papers sent to you? Can you explain why you scheduled an appraiser to evaluate my belongings without my knowledge? With each question, Jennifer seemed to shrink further into the couch cushions. When I finished, she was crying so hard she could barely speak. I never meant for it to go this far, she sobbed. It started with just one thing, that silver letter opener. I saw it on Robert's desk, and it was so beautiful, and I thought you had so many things. You'd never miss one small item, but you did miss it, didn't you? You noticed it was gone, and I panicked. I thought if I could make you think you were misplacing things, forgetting where you put them, then you wouldn't blame anyone specifically. You'd just think you were getting older. The calculation behind it was breathtaking. Jennifer hadn't just stolen from me. She'd gaslighted me, making me question my own memory and mental acuity to cover her tracks. The jewelry, the vase, Robert's tools. You sold them, didn't you? Jennifer nodded miserably. We have so much debt, Linda. More than Michael knows about. I have credit cards he doesn't know about. Loans I took out for the gym equipment. The new furniture. When I realized how much some of your things were worth, I thought if I could just sell a few items, I could pay off the debt and Michael would never have to know. How much debt, Jennifer? $75,000. The number came out as a whisper. I felt my breath catch. $75,000. No wonder Jennifer had been so systematic in her theft, so careful in her planning. She wasn't just funding lifestyle upgrades. She was trying to dig herself out of a financial hole that could destroy her marriage if Michael discovered it. Does Michael know any of this? He knows about some of the debt, but not all of it. He thinks we owe maybe $20,000 on credit cards. He doesn't know about the personal loans, the cash advances, the money I borrowed from the gym to buy equipment for my training business. I sat back in my chair, trying to process the scope of Jennifer's deception. She hadn't just been lying to me. She'd been lying to Michael too, creating a web of financial fraud that was apparently unraveling. Why are you telling me this now? Jennifer's tears started fresh. Because everything is falling apart. One of my creditors is threatening to contact Michael directly if I don't make a payment by Friday. If he finds out about all the money I owe, about the things I took from your house to pay for them, Linda, he'll leave me. I know he will. And there it was. Jennifer wasn't confessing out of genuine remorse or a sudden attack of conscience. She was confessing because she was trapped, and she needed my help to avoid the consequences of her own actions. What exactly are you asking me to do? I need $75,000. The words came out in a rush. I know it's a lot. I know I don't deserve it, but if you could loan it to me, just temporarily, I could pay off all the debts and return everything I took from your house. Michael would never have to know about any of this. I stared at her in amazement. After months of systematic theft, after excluding me from my own son's wedding, after gaslighting me and undermining my credibility with Michael, Jennifer was asking me to give her $75,000 to cover up her crimes. You want me to pay you to stop stealing from me. I want you to help me make this right, Jennifer said desperately. I know I've done terrible things, but I can change. I can be better. I can be the daughter-in-law you deserve, but only if you help me fix this mess. I thought about Robert, about the 40 years we'd worked and saved to build the security I now lived on. $75,000 was a significant portion of my nest egg, money I might need for medical expenses or care as I aged, money Robert had intended to support me for the rest of my life. Jennifer was asking me to spend Robert's legacy to cover up her betrayal of our family. I need to think about this, I said. There isn't time to think, Jennifer pressed. The creditor wants payment by Friday, and today is Wednesday. If I don't come up with the money, they'll call Michael at work. They'll tell him everything. Maybe they should. Jennifer's face crumpled. Please, Linda. I'm begging you. I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm asking anyway. Not for me, but for Michael. This will destroy him. He loves me so much, and if he finds out what I've done..." She was right about one thing. This would devastate Michael, but not because he loved Jennifer so much. Because he would have to face the fact that he had chosen her over me, defended her against my accusations, dismissed my concerns as the paranoid ramblings of a confused old woman. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Michael's name on the display. "Should I answer it?" I asked. Jennifer's eyes went wide with panic. "Please don't tell him I'm here. Please don't tell him about any of this until I figure out what to do." I looked at my daughter-in-law, this woman who had systematically betrayed my trust and then come to me begging for money to cover her tracks. This woman who was still trying to control the narrative, still trying to manage the situation on her terms. I answered the phone. "Hi, Michael. Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation the other day, and I owe you an apology. I was defensive, and I didn't really listen to what you were trying to tell me." Jennifer was making frantic gestures, shaking her head, mouthing please over and over. "That's all right, Michael. We all say things we don't mean when we're stressed." "No, it's not all right. You're my mother, and I should have taken your concerns seriously instead of dismissing them. Can we talk? Maybe I could come over this evening and we could start over." I looked at Jennifer, who had gone completely white. She was mouthing please so desperately that I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Actually, Michael, I think that's a wonderful idea. Why don't you come over right now?" "Right now?" Michael's voice carried surprise. "I'm actually just finishing up at the office. I could be there in 20 minutes. "Perfect," I said, my eyes never leaving Jennifer's panicked face. "I'll see you then." As I hung up, Jennifer launched herself forward, grabbing my hands with desperate intensity. "Linda, please, you can't do this to me. If you tell Michael everything now, before I have a chance to make it right, it will destroy our marriage." I looked down at her hands gripping mine, hands that had systematically stolen from me, hands that had signed papers to intercept my mail, hands that had written that calculating inventory of my possessions. "Jennifer," I said quietly, "your marriage was built on lies from the beginning. Maybe it's time for some truth, but the money, if you could just loan me the money, I could fix everything. We could tell Michael together, in our own time, in our own way. We could control how he learns about this." Control. Even now, even caught red-handed, Jennifer was still trying to control the narrative, still trying to manage the situation to minimize consequences for herself. Where would I even get $75,000 on short notice? "Your savings account. The CD that matured last month. I saw the paperwork when I was helping organize your mail. You have the money, Linda. I know you do." The casual admission that she'd been going through my financial documents hit me like a slap. Jennifer knew exactly how much money I had, where it was kept, when investments matured. She'd been conducting surveillance on every aspect of my financial life. "You've been planning this for a while, haven't you?" This wasn't desperation. This was a carefully orchestrated campaign. Jennifer's face crumpled. "No, that's not how it happened. It started small, just one or two things, and then it snowballed. The debt got bigger, and I needed more money to cover it. So I took more things, and then I needed more money to cover the fact that I'd taken things. A vicious cycle of your own making, yes, but one I can break if you help me. Linda, I'm not a bad person. I made bad choices, but I can make better ones. I can be the daughter-in-law you wanted me to be." I studied her face, searching for genuine remorse beneath the desperation. What I saw was self-preservation dressed up as contrition. Jennifer was sorry. Sorry she'd been caught. Sorry her plan was falling apart. Sorry she might face consequences for her actions. But I didn't see any real understanding of the harm she'd caused. "Jennifer, do you understand what you've done to my relationship with my son?" "What do you mean?" "You've made him think I'm losing my mind. Every time I tried to tell him something was wrong, you had an explanation that made me look confused or paranoid. You've destroyed my credibility with my own child." Jennifer looked genuinely puzzled. "But that wasn't intentional. I was just protecting myself. By destroying me, I never wanted to destroy you. I just wanted to manage the situation. Manage the situation." Even her apology was couched in the language of corporate efficiency. She still didn't see me as a person she'd harmed. but as a problem she'd been trying to solve. The sound of a car in the driveway made Jennifer jump. "That's Michael! Linda, please, I'm begging you, don't tell him. Not yet. Give me a chance to fix this first." I walked to the window and saw Michael getting out of his car. He looked tired, older than his 38 years. The stress of managing Jennifer's hidden debts, the ones he knew about, was clearly taking a toll on him. A week later, she begged me to pay the bill, I said, more to myself than to Jennifer. "What?" I turned to face her. "At the airport, when you told me I was almost dead anyway, did you think about this moment? Did you think about the day you'd have to come here and beg for my help?" Jennifer stared at me, and for the first time since she'd arrived, I saw something like genuine shame in her eyes. "No," she whispered. "I didn't think about anything except how angry I was that you might ruin my perfect wedding. And now? Now I realize I ruined it myself." Michael's footsteps on the front porch interrupted us. Jennifer looked around wildly, as if searching for an escape route. "The back door," she whispered. "I could go out the back door. He doesn't have to know I was here." I looked at this woman who had stolen from me, lied about me, excluded me from my own son's wedding, and was now asking me to pay $75,000 to cover up her crimes. This woman who, even in her moment of supposed repentance, was still trying to deceive her husband. "No," I said. "You don't get to sneak out the back door." Michael knocked on the front door, then let himself in with his key. "Mom, I'm here. We're in the living room," I called back. I watched Michael's face as he entered the room and saw Jennifer sitting on my couch, mascara streaked and disheveled. His expression cycled through surprise, confusion, and something that might have been suspicion. "Jennifer, what are you doing here? I thought you were at the gym." "I came to talk to your mother," Jennifer said, her voice barely audible. "About what?" I looked at Jennifer, giving her one last opportunity to tell the truth herself. She met my eyes with a pleading expression, but said nothing. "Michael," I said, "you should sit down." Over the next hour, I told my son everything. I showed him Jennifer's inventory list, explained about the missing jewelry and household items, detailed the intercepted insurance papers and the scheduled appraisal. I told him about the canceled wedding tickets and Jennifer's cruel words at the airport. Michael listened in stunned silence, occasionally looking at Jennifer as if she were a stranger. Jennifer, for her part, confirmed everything I said, adding details about her debts and her systematic theft of my possessions. When I finished, Michael sat in Robert's old chair with his head in his hands. $75,000 in debt, he said finally. "Jesus, Jennifer, how is that even possible?" "I thought I could handle it," Jennifer whispered. "I thought the training business would take off, and I could pay everything back before you found out, by stealing from my mother. I was desperate." Michael looked up at her with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, but something colder. Disappointment so profound it had curdled into contempt. "Mom," he said, turning to me, "I owe you an apology, a huge apology. When you tried to tell me about the missing jewelry, about feeling excluded, I dismissed everything you said. I made you feel like you were losing your mind." "You didn't know," I said gently. Jennifer was very convincing. "That's not an excuse. You're my mother. I should have listened to you. I should have believed you." He looked back at Jennifer. "I should have known better than to trust someone who could exclude you from our wedding." Jennifer started crying again. "Michael, I know I've made terrible mistakes, but we can fix this. Your mother could loan us the money, and I could pay back everything I took. We could start over." Michael stared at her in amazement. "You want my mother to give you $75,000? After everything you've done to her? It would be a loan. I'd pay it back." "With what money? Your training business that doesn't exist? Your imaginary income?" The harshness in Michael's voice surprised me. I'd never heard him speak to anyone with such contempt. "Michael," Jennifer pleaded, "I love you. We can work through this." He shook his head slowly. "No, we can't. This isn't just about money, Jennifer. This is about who you are. The person I married would never have done these things. People make mistakes." "Mistakes?" Michael's voice rose. "Excluding my mother from our wedding was a mistake. Stealing her jewelry was a choice. Gaslighting her about her own memory was a choice. Making me believe she was confused and paranoid was a choice. You made dozens of choices, Jennifer. All of them cruel." Jennifer turned to me desperately. "Linda, please. You said people can change. Help me prove that I can change. I looked at this woman who had caused me so much pain, who had driven a wedge between my son and me, who had stolen my possessions and my peace of mind. I thought about her words at the airport. "You're almost dead anyway, Jennifer," I said quietly. "You told me I was almost dead anyway. People who are almost dead don't give $75,000 loans to the people who wronged them." The words landed like a physical blow. Jennifer's face went white as she realized I was throwing her own cruelty back at her. "I didn't mean that," she whispered. "Yes, you did, and that's who you really are. Not the person who's sitting here crying and apologizing, the person who looked at a 65-year-old widow and saw nothing but an inconvenience standing between you and what you wanted." Michael stood up. "Jennifer, I want you to leave." "Michael, please, leave. Go stay with your sister or your parents or whoever. But don't come back to our house. We'll sort out the divorce details later." "Divorce?" Jennifer looked genuinely shocked. "You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life." After Jennifer left, Michael and I sat in the gathering dusk of my living room, processing what had happened. "Mom," he said finally, "how can you ever forgive me? There's nothing to forgive. You were manipulated by someone you trusted. I chose her over you. When you tried to tell me the truth, I chose to believe her lies instead." I reached over and took his hand. "You're choosing me now. That's what matters." 6 months later, I stood in my kitchen making dinner for two. Michael had moved back into his childhood bedroom while his divorce was finalized, and our evening meals had become a cherished ritual. We talked about everything: his work, my volunteer activities at the literacy center, the garden we were planning for spring. Jennifer had declared bankruptcy and moved back in with her parents in another state. Michael heard through mutual friends that she was working as a waitress while trying to rebuild her life. I felt sorry for her, in a distant way, but I didn't regret refusing to help her. Some lessons can only be learned through consequences. The missing items were never recovered. Jennifer had sold most of them to pay debts. But I found I didn't miss them as much as I'd expected. They were just things, after all. What mattered was having my son back, having his trust and respect restored. "Mom," Michael said as we sat down to dinner, "I've been thinking about getting you a security system. Motion detectors, cameras, the works." I laughed. "I don't think that's necessary. I'm pretty good at spotting thieves now." "Still," he said, "I'd feel better knowing you're protected." I looked across the table at my son. Really looked at him. He seemed younger than he had in years, as if divorcing Jennifer had lifted a weight from his shoulders he hadn't even realized he was carrying. "I'm already protected," I said. "I have something no security system can provide." "What's that?" "I have someone who believes me when I tell the truth." Michael smiled, and for the first time since Robert died, I felt completely at peace. The price of that peace had been higher than I'd ever imagined, but some things, dignity, truth, the love of your child, are worth any cost. Outside, the sun was setting over the garden where Robert's roses were preparing for their spring